During Thanksgiving dinner at my son-in-law's family mansion, his father threw a glass of red wine in my daughter's face. His son laughed and said, "Thanks, Dad. Maybe that'll teach her some respect." I felt my hands grip the armrest of my chair. I stood up, excused myself, and walked to the hallway. I pulled out my phone and made a single call. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Before we continue, please subscribe to Hallowed Vengeance, and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. I hadn't seen my daughter Sarah in 4 months when the invitation came. Not from her, but from her husband David's assistant. A formal card on expensive paper. The Pemberton family requests your presence at Thanksgiving dinner. November 23rd, 5 p.m. sharp. No warmth. No, we'd love to see you, Dad. Just a summons, like I was being called to appear before royalty. I'm Frank Morrison, 62 years old. I live in a small house in Tempe, Arizona, with a yard I tend myself and a 20-year-old truck in the driveway. My neighbors probably think I'm just another retired working man living on a modest pension. They're not wrong, exactly. I did retire, and my pension is modest. But there's more to the story, and until that Thanksgiving, I'd kept that story to myself. The Pemberton estate sits in Paradise Valley, one of those gated communities where the houses have names instead of numbers. I drove up the long driveway on that Thursday afternoon, past manicured gardens and a fountain that probably cost more than my entire house. The mansion itself was all glass and stone, the kind of place you see in magazines about successful people. David answered the door. My son-in-law, tall, good-looking, wearing a sweater that probably cost $500. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile you give to someone you're obligated to tolerate. "Frank, you made it. Not Dad, never Dad. Just Frank, like I was a business acquaintance." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, though we both knew I'd missed quite a bit lately, not by choice. Sarah appeared behind him. My daughter. She'd lost weight since I'd last seen her. Dark circles under her eyes. Her smile when she saw me was genuine but brief, like she was afraid to show too much emotion. "Hi, Dad." She hugged me quickly, and I felt how thin she'd become. She used to be strong, athletic. Now she felt fragile. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you?" "Good, good. Busy with work." The lie came easily to her lips. She worked from home doing graphic design, but David's father had made it clear he considered that playing on the computer. The house was enormous inside. Vaulted ceilings, expensive art on the walls, furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything was pristine, cold, designed to impress rather than welcome. Richard Pemberton held court in the great room. That's the only way to describe it. He didn't just sit. He occupied space with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. Mid-50s, silver hair, expensive suit, even for a family holiday. He was on his phone, gesturing dramatically while closing some deal. When he saw me, he didn't stand. "Frank, the janitor, good of you to join us." He said it with a smile, but the word janitor carried weight. Dismissal, condescension. I'd worked as a custodian to put myself through night school 40 years ago. Sarah must have mentioned it once. Richard never forgot details he could use as weapons. "Richard, thanks for having me. We're all family here, right?" He went back to his phone call without waiting for an answer. Dinner was in a dining room that could seat 20. Crystal chandelier, china that probably cost more than my monthly pension, wine that Richard announced cost $300 a bottle. He poured it himself, making a show of the price. "This is a 2015 Bordeaux. I have a wine cellar worth over $200,000. Do you know anything about wine, Frank?" "I know what I like," I said carefully. "Beer drinker, I imagine. Nothing wrong with that. Simple tastes for simple people." He laughed. David laughed with him. Sarah stared at her plate. Richard's wife, Patricia, was quiet. She'd stopped trying to soften her husband's edges years ago. She just moved food around her plate and refilled wine glasses. The meal began with Richard talking about his latest development project, luxury condos in downtown Scottsdale. He dropped numbers casually. 8-figure investments, 6-figure deposits, permits he'd secured through his connections. He made sure I knew that my entire life's savings probably equaled what he spent on landscaping. Sarah here wanted to invest some of her design money into the project, Richard said, cutting into his prime rib. I told her to focus on her little computer projects and leave real business to the adults. I thought it might be a good investment, Sarah said quietly. Investment. Richard laughed. Honey, you make what, $30,000 a year? That's not investing. That's hobby money. Let the men handle the real finances. I watched David nod along. He never defended her, never pushed back. His father's approval meant more than his wife's dignity. Throughout dinner, I observed the way Sarah flinched when Richard's voice rose, how she apologized for everything, the temperature of the food, forgetting to refill a water glass, having an opinion. The expensive camera equipment I'd given her for her birthday sat unused in the corner. When I asked about it, Richard said, "Toys don't pay bills." I excused myself to use the bathroom. Walking through the hallway, I noticed the photos. Richard's family covered every wall. His other children from his first marriage, his parents, his siblings. Not a single picture included Sarah. She'd been edited out of the visual history of the family, just like they'd tried to edit me out. When I returned, Richard was lecturing Sarah about her spending. $200 at the grocery store? What are you buying? Caviar? He laughed at his own joke. Frank, you understand. You raised her. Did you teach her anything about money? Or were you too busy mopping floors? I was about to respond when David cut in. Dad's right. Sarah, you need to be more careful. We're not poor, but we're not wasteful either. I bought groceries for the week and toiletries, Sarah said quietly. I showed you the receipt. Don't argue with your husband, Patricia said suddenly. First word she'd spoken in 30 minutes. A wife should trust her husband's judgment. Richard raised his glass. See? Now that's a woman who understands marriage. Patricia knows her place. Not like these modern women who think they know everything. The table fell silent. Sarah's face had gone red, but she didn't respond. She just sat there, absorbing the criticism, the belittlement, the casual cruelty, disguised as family dinner conversation. I'd been watching this pattern all evening. This wasn't new. This was routine for them. Tear down Sarah, make her feel small, remind her she's lucky to be part of their world. My daughter, the girl who'd won math competitions in high school, who'd put herself through college, who'd built a small but successful design business, sitting at a table full of people who treated her like she was nothing. Richard poured himself more wine. The bottle was almost empty. He was getting louder, more aggressive. The kind of drunk where the truth comes out, where the mask slips. You know what your problem is, Sarah? He pointed at her with his fork. You don't appreciate what you have. My son gave you this life, this house, this opportunity, and you just take and take. Dad, maybe we should, David started. No, she needs to hear this. Richard stood up, walked around the table. He loomed over Sarah. You were nothing when David met you. A girl with a laptop and dreams. We brought you into this family, gave you everything, and you can't even show basic gratitude. I am grateful, Sarah whispered. Are you? Because all I see is entitlement, asking for money for your business, questioning our decisions, acting like you have any right to an opinion. Richard, maybe that's enough, I said quietly. He turned on me. Oh, the janitor speaks. Tell me, Frank, what did you teach your daughter? How to be mediocre? How to marry up and then forget where she came from? I taught her to be kind, to work hard, to respect herself. Respect herself? Richard laughed. That harsh bark I'd heard all evening. Is that why she married into money? Because she respects herself? Or because she saw an opportunity? I loved David, Sarah said, her voice cracking. Loved his last name, you mean? Loved what we could provide. Richard was in full form now, wine-drunk and mean. Girls like you, from families like yours, you're always looking for a leg up. Well, you got it. So stop complaining. That's not fair. Sarah stood up. Her chair scraped back. I've never asked for anything. I work. I contribute. Richard's hand shot out. the wine glass still in it. Red wine splashed across Sarah's face, soaking her white blouse, dripping onto her lap. The room went silent. Even Patricia gasped. Sarah stood there, wine dripping from her chin, her eyes wide with shock and humiliation. And David laughed. Actually laughed. "Thanks, Dad. Maybe that'll teach her some respect." Time stopped. My daughter standing there, soaked in wine and shame. Her husband laughing. Her father-in-law breathing hard, satisfied with his display of dominance. Patricia staring at her plate. Nobody moving to help. My hands gripped the armrest of my chair. 62 years old, and I felt every muscle in my body coil tight. But I didn't yell. Didn't move aggressively. 30 years of training had taught me control. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady. Too steady. I stood slowly, placed my napkin beside my plate, and walked to the hallway. Through the archway, I could still see the dining room. Sarah standing frozen. David pouring himself more wine. Richard settling back into his chair like a king who'd just dealt with a peasant uprising. I pulled out my phone. Robert Chen. The number was still in my contacts. Special agent in charge, Phoenix IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We'd worked together before I retired. He'd called me 6 months ago, asking about some case he was building. We'd stayed in touch. "Robert, it's Frank Morrison." "Frank? Happy Thanksgiving. Everything okay? I need to report a case. Possible tax fraud, money laundering, large scale." His tone shifted. "Professional. I'm listening." "Richard Pemberton. Real estate developer, Paradise Valley. Multiple properties, large cash flows, suspicious transactions. I've been present at dinner tonight, where he detailed several deals that raise red flags. Development projects with questionable funding sources. Offshore accounts mentioned. Properties purchased through shell corporations." "How do you know this?" "He was bragging about it, in front of witnesses. I'd like to make a formal report." "Frank, are you sure? You know what this involves." "I'm certain. This needs to be investigated. Tonight." "Tonight? It's Thanksgiving. I have reason to believe documents might be destroyed if we wait. He mentioned shredding files tomorrow for tax purposes. I'd consider that time-sensitive." There was a pause. Robert knew me, knew my record, knew I didn't make calls like this lightly. "Give me the address. I'll have agents there in 30 minutes. I provided the details, then added, "Robert, there's something else you should know. This is personal. My daughter is married to his son. I'm a witness to what happened tonight. I'm not objective. Are you certain about the financial crimes?" "I spent 30 years investigating financial crimes." "Yes, I'm certain." "Then your personal involvement doesn't matter. Evidence is evidence. We'll be there." I ended the call and returned to the dining room. Sarah had gone to clean up. David was talking business with his father. Patricia was clearing plates. Nobody seemed to think anything was wrong. "Everything all right?" Richard asked, not really interested. "Yes, thank you. I just needed to make a call." "Working on Thanksgiving?" He smirked. "Oh, wait. You're retired. What do you do, Frank? Besides live on that government pension?" "I spend time thinking," I said carefully, "reflecting on my career. The cases I worked, the people I met." "Fascinating," Richard said with exaggerated interest. "David, get your father-in-law a beer. That's more his speed than this wine." 20 minutes passed. Sarah returned wearing a different shirt, her eyes red from crying. She sat down quietly, avoiding everyone's gaze. The doorbell rang. Patricia stood. "Who would come by on Thanksgiving?" "Probably neighbors," Richard said dismissively. "Tell them we're busy." Patricia walked to the front door. We heard it open, heard her sharp intake of breath. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Special Agent Robert Chen, IRS Criminal Investigation Division. We have a warrant to enter and investigate financial records for Richard Pemberton." Patricia's voice was shrill. "What? This is Thanksgiving. This is our home. You can't just—" "Ma'am, we have a warrant signed by a federal judge. Please step aside." 5 agents in dark suits entered. Robert led them, his expression professional. He scanned the room, saw me, gave the slightest nod. "What the hell is this?" Richard was on his feet. "This is harassment. This is—" "Mr. Pemberton, I'm Special Agent Chen. We received a credible report of tax fraud, money laundering, and financial crimes. We have a warrant to search these premises and seize financial records. A report? From who? From Mr. Frank Morrison. Robert gestured to me. He contacted us this evening with detailed information about your business practices. Richard's face went purple. Frank, you called the IRS on me? On Thanksgiving? David stood up. Dad, who is Frank Morrison? Why would they listen to him? Robert pulled out his credentials. Mr. Morrison is a retired special agent from this division. 30 years of service. One of the best financial investigators I've ever known. When he calls with a concern, we take it seriously. The room went silent. You could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. What? Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. Dad, you were IRS, criminal investigation, sweetheart. Special agent for 30 years. I retired 3 years ago. Richard's mouth opened and closed. David looked between me and his father, confusion and panic mixing on his face. You told me he was a janitor, David said. He was, Richard sputtered. He cleaned buildings. To pay for night school, I said calmly. 40 years ago. Then I got my accounting degree. Then my law degree. Then I joined IRS-CI. Spent 3 decades investigating exactly the kind of financial crimes Mr. Pemberton was describing over dinner. You lying son of a Richard started toward me. Sir, I'd advise you to remain calm, Robert said, stepping between us. We have agents searching your office right now. I'd also like to inform you that you're being recorded. Anything you say can and will be used in federal court. The next 4 hours were methodical. Agents went through Richard's home office, his computer, his file cabinets. They found offshore account information, shell corporation documents, falsified tax returns, evidence of unreported income going back 6 years. Richard tried to bluster, called his lawyer, who arrived an hour later, took one look at the evidence agents were cataloging, and advised his client to stop talking immediately. David kept asking questions nobody would answer. Patricia cried quietly in the corner. Sarah sat with me in the living room, away from the chaos. Dad, why didn't you ever tell me? Because when I retired, I wanted to be your father, not Special Agent Morrison who sent people to prison. I wanted you to know me as Dad, not as the man who could investigate and destroy lives. But all these years, they treated you like you were nothing. I let them. People reveal themselves when they think you have no power. Richard showed me exactly who he was tonight. How he treats people he thinks are beneath him. How he treats you. She was crying. I didn't know it was that bad. I thought it was just his personality. Tough love. That wasn't love, sweetheart. That was abuse. And when he threw that wine in your face, when David laughed, I paused, keeping my voice steady. I couldn't let that stand. What happens now? Robert approached us. Miss Morrison Pemberton, we'll need a statement from you about your knowledge of your father-in-law's business practices. I don't know anything, Sarah said quickly. That's fine. We just need to document that. It's procedure. He looked at me. Frank, good work tonight. Preliminary search confirms everything you suspected. This is going to be a major case. By 11 p.m., agents were loading boxes of documents into vans. Richard and Patricia stood in their grand entryway, watching their world get packed up. David was on the phone with attorneys, his voice high and panicked. Sarah, I said quietly, get your things. You're coming home with me. But David is going to have his own problems soon. You need to be somewhere safe. She hesitated, then nodded. We went upstairs to the bedroom she shared with David. She packed quickly. Clothes, laptop, the camera equipment she'd stopped using. The important things. David appeared in the doorway. Where are you going? To stay with my father for a while. Sarah, we need to talk about this. We can work through. You laughed, she said, her voice steady now. Your father threw wine in my face, and you laughed. You said maybe it would teach me respect. Dad was upset. You shouldn't have argued with him. I didn't argue. I existed, and that was too much for him. For you, don't be dramatic. This is about your father causing problems. Calling the IRS on Thanksgiving? What kind of person does that? I spoke from the hallway. The kind who watched his daughter get abused and decided documentation was more effective than violence. David's face hardened. You destroyed my family. Your father destroyed himself. I just reported crimes. The IRS found evidence because the crimes existed. I didn't plant that evidence, David. He created it. We left that night. Sarah followed me in her car to my small house in Tempe. The house Richard had called inadequate. The house that was about to become a refuge. In my living room, with cheap furniture and walls that needed painting, Sarah finally broke down. What do I do now, Dad? You rebuild. You remember who you were before you met them. You remember that you're strong. I feel so stupid. I let them treat me that way. Abuse is gradual. They wear you down slowly, make you think it's normal. It's not your fault. What happens to Richard? To David? That depends on what the investigation finds. But Sarah, that's not your concern anymore. Your concern is healing, moving forward. She spent that night in my spare bedroom. The bed wasn't expensive. The sheets weren't high thread count, but she was safe. The next morning, David called. 12 times. Then his lawyer called. Then Richard's lawyer called. They want to talk, I told Sarah over coffee. I don't want to talk to them. You don't have to. But legally, you should probably get your own attorney. This is going to get complicated. The investigation moved faster than I'd expected. Robert called me 3 days after Thanksgiving. Frank, this is bigger than we thought. Richard Pemberton has been running a sophisticated tax fraud scheme for 8 years. Shell corporations in 3 states, offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, unreported income exceeding $15 million. Criminal charges? Federal prosecutors are building a case. Tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering. We're looking at serious prison time. What about the son? David appears to have been involved in some of the transactions. He's lawyering up, but his exposure is less than his father's. 2 weeks later, federal prosecutors filed charges. Richard Pemberton was arrested at his office, his company's assets frozen pending investigation. The news coverage was extensive. Prominent Phoenix developer, charged with massive tax fraud. Sarah filed for divorce. Her attorney, recommended by Robert's office, was sharp and thorough. David tried to contest it, but the fact that he was potentially facing charges himself weakened his position. The trial came in April. Federal courthouse in Phoenix, Judge Maria Rodriguez presiding. I sat in the gallery watching Robert and his team present their case. Documents, financial records, testimony from accountants and business associates. The evidence was overwhelming. I testified on day 4, not about Thanksgiving dinner, about the financial crimes, my expertise as a former agent, my analysis of the shell corporations, my professional opinion on the sophistication of the fraud scheme. Richard's attorney tried to paint me as biased, pursuing a personal vendetta. Mr. Morrison, isn't it true that you hold a grudge against Mr. Pemberton for how he treated your family? I hold him accountable for crimes he committed. Personal feelings don't change financial records. But you initiated this investigation on Thanksgiving, during a family gathering. That seems personal. I heard him describe criminal activity. I reported it. That's what any citizen should do. The fact that I have expertise in this area made my report more credible, but the crimes existed regardless of my involvement. You could have handled this privately. Family to family. Financial crimes aren't family matters. They're federal crimes. Would you suggest a witness to bank robbery handle it privately? The attorney moved on. I'd done this too many times to be rattled. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. Judge Rodriguez was thorough in her assessment. Mr. Pemberton, you engaged in a deliberate, sophisticated scheme to defraud the United States government. You evaded millions in taxes while living lavishly and looking down on those who paid their fair share. This court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, 5 years supervised release, and restitution of $15.2 million to the IRS. Richard aged 10 years in that moment. His shoulders slumped. Patricia sobbed in the gallery. David pleaded guilty to lesser charges, cooperated with prosecutors. He received 2 years supervised probation and a $200,000 fine. Sarah's divorce finalized in May. She got half their shared assets, which wasn't much since most had been in Richard's name and were now frozen or seized. But she got her freedom. That was worth more. One afternoon in June, I was working in my garden when a car pulled up. David got out, looking thin and worn. "Frank, can we talk?" I set down my trowel. "All right." He sat on my porch steps. "I came to apologize. To me or to Sarah? Both. But she won't see me, and I understand why." He rubbed his face. "I was terrible to her. To you. I let my father control everything. I thought if I pleased him, if I sided with him, he'd respect me. But he only respected power, and I had none. You had the power to protect your wife. You chose not to. I know. I was weak and cruel, and I'm sorry." I studied him. He looked genuinely broken. Prison sentence hanging over him, family name destroyed, marriage ended. The price of enabling a tyrant. Apologies don't erase harm, David. They acknowledge it. What you do next is what matters. I'm in therapy, twice a week, working on everything. I know I can't fix what I broke, but I'm trying to understand why I broke it. That's a start. Do you think Sarah will ever forgive me? That's not my question to answer. Forgiveness is a gift. No one is owed that gift. You hurt her deeply. You laughed when your father humiliated her. She may never forgive that. And she doesn't have to. He nodded, crying now. I just wanted you to know I understand what I did, what we did, and I'm sorry. After he left, I called Sarah. She was renting a small apartment in Scottsdale, rebuilding her design business, thriving in ways she hadn't in years. David came by, I told her. How did he seem? Broken, apologetic. Whether it's genuine or just desperation, I can't say. Do you think I should see him? Only if you want to. Only if it helps you heal. Not because you feel obligated. I don't think I'm ready. Maybe not ever. That's okay, sweetheart. You get to decide who has access to your life. That evening, sitting on my porch with a cold beer, I thought about what Robert had said months ago. When Frank Morrison makes a call, we listen. People think power is about being loud, about dominating rooms, about making others feel small. Richard thought that. He mistook cruelty for strength, wealth for wisdom. But real power is different. It's knowledge, documentation, understanding systems, knowing when to stay quiet and when to act. Richard never understood that. He saw a retired janitor with a modest pension. He never saw the federal agent who'd built careers on finding exactly what Richard had spent years hiding. Sarah came over for dinner the next week. She'd gained weight back. The dark circles were gone. She was laughing again. "Dad, I got a new client, a major one. They saw my work and offered me a 6-month contract. That's wonderful. It pays more than I made all last year." She paused. "You know what the funny thing is? Richard always said my design work was worthless, that it wasn't real business. But I'm building something that's mine, something honest. That's the difference. You build on truth. He built on lies. Your foundation is solid. His collapsed the moment someone examined it. Did you know? When you made that call on Thanksgiving, did you know how big it would get? I knew he was committing crimes. I knew they needed to be reported. The magnitude? That surprised even me. But Sarah, I didn't do it to destroy him. I did it to protect you. I know, and I'm grateful. Even though it's been hard, seeing everything fall apart, watching David struggle. I'm grateful. Justice isn't supposed to feel like celebration. It's supposed to feel like balance restored. We ate dinner in my small kitchen. Simple food, simple conversation. She told me about her clients, her new apartment, her plans for the future. Later, washing dishes, she said, "I wish you'd told me about your career, about who you really were. Would it have changed anything? Would you have married David if you'd known? Maybe, maybe not. But I would have felt less alone. I would have known I had someone in my corner who understood things, systems, how to fight back. You always had someone in your corner. You just didn't know what tools were in my toolbox." She hugged me then, tightly. "Thanks for using those tools. Always, sweetheart. Always. 6 months later, I was trimming hedges when Sadie Martinez from down the street stopped by. She'd lived in the neighborhood 20 years, knew everyone's business. Frank, I saw the news. That developer who went to prison? That was your son-in-law's father? Yes. And you're the one who reported him? I witnessed crimes being committed. I reported them to the appropriate authorities. She studied me with new interest. People are saying you used to work for the IRS. That you were some kind of investigator. I was a special agent for 30 years. Now I'm retired. Why didn't you ever mention it? Didn't seem relevant. I'm not that person anymore. I'm just Frank, tending his garden, living quietly. Quietly, she smiled. Frank, you took down a millionaire and sent him to federal prison. That's not what I'd call quiet. I reported a crime. The justice system did the rest. After she left, I thought about what it meant to be known. For 30 years, I'd been Special Agent Morrison, a name that made criminals nervous, that opened doors, that carried weight. Then I retired and became just Frank, the guy with the old truck who mowed his own lawn. Richard had looked at me and seen nothing worth respecting, just a working-class retiree with no status, no power, no significance. He'd treated me and my daughter accordingly. He never understood that power doesn't disappear when you retire. Knowledge doesn't evaporate. Skills don't vanish. I'd simply chosen to put them away, to live a quiet life, to be present for Sarah without the weight of my career between us. But when it mattered, when my daughter needed protection, I picked up those tools again. I made one call, and everything changed. Not because I was vindictive, not because I wanted revenge, but because justice matters, because documentation matters, because protecting the people you love matters more than keeping secrets about who you used to be. Sarah thrives now. Her business is growing. She's dating someone new, someone kind. She's building a life based on her terms, her values, her strength. David is rebuilding too, trying to become someone different from the man who laughed while his wife was humiliated. Whether he succeeds, time will tell. Richard serves his sentence in a federal prison in California. He'll be there until he's 63. Maybe he'll learn something. Maybe he won't. That's not my concern anymore. Patricia divorced him while he was awaiting trial, took what assets remained and moved to Florida. I don't know if Sarah ever heard from her. Some relationships can't be repaired. On Sunday afternoons, Sarah comes over. We cook together, simple meals in my simple kitchen. We talk about her work, my garden, the neighbors, normal things, peaceful things. Sometimes she'll say, "Tell me a story from your IRS days." And I'll share something, a case I worked, a technique I used, the satisfaction of seeing justice done after months or years of investigation. But mostly, we just exist together, father and daughter. No drama, no chaos, no one throwing wine or laughing at cruelty. Just peace. And that, after everything, is what I fought for. Not revenge, not destruction, not the satisfaction of seeing Richard humbled, though I won't pretend that didn't feel appropriate. I fought for the quiet Sunday afternoons, the simple dinners, the freedom for my daughter to laugh without fear, to build without being torn down, to exist without apologizing for taking up space. That's what power is really for. Not dominating others, not proving superiority, but protecting the people you love and creating space for them to become who they're meant to be. Richard never understood that. He thought power meant making others feel small. He learned differently. And sitting here on my porch, 62 years old, drinking a beer and watching the Arizona sunset, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Complete peace. Because justice, true justice, isn't loud. It doesn't gloat. It doesn't parade its victories. It just restores balance. And then it returns to tending its garden, living quietly, loving fiercely, and knowing that when necessary, one phone call can change everything. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video, subscribe to Hallowed Vengeance, and share your thoughts in the comments. And let us know where you're listening from. I'd love to know this story reached you. Thank you for listening.